perfect. So we'll call this meeting to order. I'll start by taking roll call. Anderson,
Here.
Bork,
Here.
Gade is here, Grimm,
Here.
Harrelson,
Here.
Krylov. Oh, not here, okay. Murray,
Here.
Shetty, here, Zillman,
Here.
Smith, and Traer.
Here.
Okay, great. For a second, I thought I saw Krylov, so I was like, where'd she go? Alrighty, so we'll get approval of the minutes from the September 8th, which are included in today's packet. Are there any corrections needed for minutes?
I'll note that we did receive two corrections between posting it and now. Ben, we know that you were at the last meeting. And there was one other person marked absent, Nadia. Nadia was present as well. So we've made that correction in the draft, and that will be the version we file. Is there anybody else that we misattributed in attendance? Apologies for the error.
Good catch. All right, so we'll start on announcements and reports, action items from last meeting.
Oh, Jamie, I think we do need a vote on the minutes.
Oh,
though,
sorry, you're right, yes, minutes. Can I get a motion for approval?
Pending correction.
Pending corrections.
Motion to approve pending correction.
Okay,
Second.
all right, great. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. All right, so now we will jump into the action items from last meeting. Commission members were asked to provide the prioritization scoring for transportation items. Sounds like we'll talk a little bit about that later as well.
Yeah. I'll just note, thank you to those of you who got it in. We had a couple folks who didn't quite manage to get them in, and that's not the end of the world. We also heard from some folks who did submit them that they really found they would have enjoyed or felt they would have benefited from having a discussion of these items the way we did on buildings. So we carved out some time today to run through those. Those of you who did submit them will have found your score sheet at your site. So that if you want to change any of your scores, you can, and we'll collect them back up. If you were unable to submit it, you will have a blank sheet at your seat that you can fill scores in, and we'll collect those at the end as well. Michelle, you,
I have a blank sheet, but I sent it in.
oh,
But anyway, I have a copy of it from the email that I sent,
Okay.
so.
oh, apologies. We'll double check on that, but if you just want to yes, you can send it again, or you can fill in with the numbers you've got on the paper at your seat, and we'll go from there.
Okay.
And you can wait until we get to that section to do it.
Okay.
The next item on reports is a recap of Climate Fest events. I am tickled pink to tell you we had such a great Climate Fest this year. Our events were very well attended across the board. We had folks who came to every single event, which has not happened in past years, and we had folks who came from other cities to attend and participate, which was really nice. We sometimes get out of town folks for the EV car show, but this year we had them at the film. We had them at the read-along at the river, and possibly elsewhere. You know, we don't take attendance, but it was nice when folks walked up and let us know they had heard about it and made the trip to participate. So that was really great. I think among the more notable events was the tour of the solar array we had out at the airport. It was very popular from the minute it opened. The room was full of people, and people responded very well to the artwork and the craft that was done. They really liked the video that we had talking a little about the solar array, and then when we went out and took the tours, people really seemed to enjoy that. And in fact, there was a moment, and Zach, feel free to jump in since I know you were at that event, but in both of the tours, there was a moment where we invited attendees to just walk up and touch the solar array, and we explained, like, you're not going to hurt it, it's not going to hurt you. And I was really struck by how eagerly people went up. There were some people who wanted to touch each row, you know, and it occurred to me that some of the discussions that have come up in the past, I think prior to any of you being on the commission, but when we've had these large solar array proposals in the past, you know, there's been some concerns raised, as you see in other communities, about impacts to wildlife or the surrounding ground or what might be the human health impacts. And what really struck me in that tour is the minute people put their hands on the solar array, like those questions just evaporated, right? Like the minute you know it's not going to hurt you, it's very clear it's not going to hurt other things as well. So I am mentioning that one specifically so it can live in all our collective memory, so that the next time we're looking at a big solar array going in somewhere, or even a little one, we can remember to offer tours out at the airport so people have an up-close look to help inform the discussion. I think that will help with our outreach events greatly. So, were there any things you wanted to make note of? I know, Zach, you were at a couple events.
Well, yeah, I was just gonna jump in and say, you know, a big kudos to climate staff as well, because this week it was a lot of work. The events that I went to were amazing, so really great work. I don't know, we really appreciate you guys. So
Oh, thank you so much. And we actually, for our ride and drive, did get test drives in an EV. I should note that as well. A dealer came over and let people try out an electric Mustang. So that's an exciting and persuasive car. Diane, was there anything that you felt like calling out from the events? All right. Then we've got our upcoming events. We did also last month conduct the volunteer bike and ped count, where we recruited, I think, more than 50 volunteers. Is that right, Diane? Yeah, to stand at different intersections in the city and try to help us get some before data for some of the streets that have been under consideration for our pilot bollarded bike lane project. We are going to be reporting out the results of that data collection in collaboration with our transportation planning staff. And that will take place on October 23rd from noon to 1. It is a virtual event that's going to be held on Zoom. We provided a link in the newsletter, but if any of you do not get the newsletter and would like the link so that you can listen in on some of that data, just let us know and we'll send it your way so you can get signed up. And then I also wanted to note the Iowa Energy Summit is coming at the end of the month on October 29th and 30th. This is not something we put together. This is put together by the Iowa Association for Energy Efficiency. This year, they are holding it in Coralville, and we have been involved with proposing some sessions for it. One of which will be featuring the Student Build project here in Iowa City, discussing past projects, and one that is underway for this year that we're very excited about, highlighting both the community collaboration aspect of it, the energy efficient design, and talking about how it's a workforce development initiative as well, with a focus on energy efficiency, which is really great. So if any of you have an interest in attending that, that is a public event, and you can reach out. We'll hook you up with some registration information, and we'll, if you would like, do a report out about how that went in the next meeting. Does anybody have any events happening in the community that you would like to highlight? All right.
All right, well, that brings us to our new business with the small-scale nuclear class project presentation. If you want to come up to the mic, we would love to have you. Go ahead and introduce yourselves and take it away.
Yeah, so my name is Adam Swartzengruber.
I'm Grace Dillingham.
So last spring, we were in a class, Green Chemical and Energy Technologies. Our professor every year assigns a research poster, and to come up with ideas, reached out to the commission here, and you guys, or at least some of you, were interested in learning more about TerraPower's new Natrium nuclear reactor. And so we thought it was a very interesting topic, so we decided to look into it. And we're basically presenting what we found over the course of last semester.
I'll hop in here just to note one thing, and that is we want to be crystal clear. A small-scale nuclear reactor is not something under consideration to build in Iowa City or even its vicinity at present, or as far as we know in the future. It is something that is being discussed for the energy mix of Iowa writ large. And so the intent in having this discussion was just to provide some preliminary information so that as those conversations continue, you all and us, we can be informed and have a little background information. But we want to be very clear in the minutes and the recording to, rest assured, no one is thinking about putting a nuclear reactor in the middle of Iowa City. Okay. All right, now you can take it away.
Would you speak a little louder, please? I'm
Yes,
sorry, or raise the mic a little, or both?
Is this better? I don't know if it's.
You may just want to lean in.
Yeah, there we go.
Thank you.
Yep, so our project we broke into 3 categories: waste management, how will solid, liquid, and gaseous waste be handled at the facility, the safety, is this something that will blow up in our faces? Hopefully not. We don't think so. And then economics, how will it actually, how much will it cost? Is this even economically feasible to perform? So I'll hand it off to Grace for the rest. For the next section, I should say.
Hello. So the picture that we have on the screen is currently the design that is going on for the Wyoming plant, which is currently being built by TerraPower. Some of the main considerations in this picture is the section that is outlined in the blue was considered our energy sector, and everything in the orange outline is being considered our nuclear sector. Some main points here is you'll see that there is a piping between the two. That's where kind of the excess hot salt goes through and then enters a heat exchanger to be created into steam, which will go to a turbine to get that electricity. And then a little bit will go back into the reactor building to continue with the reaction to create a zero carbon emission facility. So to start off with the waste management, this facility will handle all 3 phases of waste on site. With the solid waste, it can handle both your dry and wet waste. The dry waste includes your PPE, filters, equipment, and they will be classified by the 10 CFR 61.55, which is a classifying system that the nuclear regulation works with for classifying basically how radioactive something is. So it will be based off of that system, and then with those classifications, they will be compacted, packaged, and stored inside of the fuel handling facility that is on site as well. Similarly with the wet waste, which is mostly your resins, those will be evaporated and then similarly handled with solid waste. Going to the liquid waste, this facility is aimed to be a zero liquid waste facility, so everything will be either reused or handled as solid waste. So for reusing, it will be either filtered, demineralized, or have ion exchanged to reduce that radioactivity and be able to be reused in the facility, in the reaction system. And then whatever cannot be reused in the system will be evaporated and then treated as a solid waste with the same classifications as the solid waste. And lastly, with the gaseous waste, there's very little in the facility. What it's mostly for is the sodium cover, which includes inert gases that help maintain the reactivity of the facility. So with that, it will be filtered through active charcoal beds and then filtered throughout the rest of the system to be released with all the federal regulations being met with the gas. As for safety, the main topic of discussion with this reactor is that it is sodium cooled. So whereas your normal light water reactors are cooled by water in this system by the reactor core, this is done with sodium. So with this, the sodium's boiling point is at almost 900 degrees Celsius, while the reactor only operates at around 355 degrees Celsius. And when you compare that to your cooled with water, it is approximately 300 degrees boiling point. And with this, the sodium cooled can be activated or can be run at atmospheric pressure, so you don't have to worry about pressurizing the system as well. So with the sodium, the boiling point does not reach the peak reaction temperatures that the core can reach. Secondly, with the separate boundaries between the nuclear and energy sector, I mentioned this a little bit earlier with the separate orange and blue sectors. Those operations are very separate. The only thing that's connecting them is that piping and a few control systems. The piping has several factors to it that will shut down if something does happen, but when you're looking at it at the full term, if something happens in the energy sector, that nothing will affect the nuclear sector and vice versa. So, and then with the mitigative systems, these will all be in the nuclear sector. So you have your guard vessel, which is around the reactor itself, and that will hold any sodium leaks. So there will be, all the leakage will be contained to be dealt with accordingly. As well as cooling air systems, there is an intermediate air cooling system which actively sends air into the system if it senses that the heat is not being exchanged correctly, so that will help with that exchange. And then finally, with the automatic control rods, those control rods will be in the reactor core itself and will be handling the reactivity of normal operation, or if there is any abnormal operations, it will immediately sense that and act accordingly with shutting it down.
Really quickly on the pressurized water note, how most reactors run, the main source of concern there is if you ever lose pressure, the boiling point of water drops, and so you can cooling water around the reactor can boil, and you stop losing heat transfer out, and so that's where you go into meltdown. So we don't have that issue. We don't need to maintain pressure in a salt cooled reactor. So my main part of this project was looking at the economics. So this reactor is designed to produce 345 megawatts of energy at 41% thermal efficiency, while always producing this 345 megawatts. It also can store 1,800 megawatts of energy as heat in a storage tank of molten salt, which, using that 41% efficiency, gets out to be 700-ish megawatts of energy that can be used on demand for just fluxing energy. So the Wyoming plant that's being built right now is projected to cost $4 billion to make. 50% of it was subsidized by the Department of Energy, but of course the issue of the matter is that it's not built yet, so some of these numbers are slightly speculative. Based off of similar designs that have been proposed, it should take about $34 million a year for fuel, $69.5 million a year in maintenance, and $6 million per year in a decommissioned fund, so that once the site is closed down, everything can be cleaned away and there's no residual radiation. So the expected lifetime that they claim will be 80 years of constant operation. The way that the U.S. Licenses power plants is you get a 40 years just for base, and then you can apply for 20-year extensions. So they claim that they can make it to at least that 80-year period. So then I did some comparisons with other forms of energy production. All of these sources were scaled to produce 345 megawatts of electricity constantly. Electricity will be sold at about 8 cents per kilowatt hour, which is about this price of electricity in Iowa City. Of course, you know, might not be in Iowa City. We're not talking about it being in Iowa City. So take the rest of this information with that in mind. Battery systems are needed for the power sources that are not constantly producing energy. They need to be able to store energy for the times when they're not in production. And so you can see the breakdown there. For solar, I assumed that we could get about 4 hours a day of peak production. And so we would need to store energy for the remaining 24 hours. Wind turbines would operate at 50% efficiency. And so I gave it 12-hour storage required. And then carbon taxes, renewable energy subsidies, tax credits, interest on loans were not accounted for because they're just subject to change and somewhat out of the scope. So here's the breakdown. The Natrium reactor there is the second line. So I broke it down by land area, the initial capital costs, the operating costs, the years to pay back the principal, and the expected lifespan. As you can see, land area-wise, it has the smallest footprint. I should say the comparisons here are solar panels, small modular reactors, which is basically a small nuclear reactor like what we're talking about here with Natrium, except not with the salt-cooled capacities. Large light water reactors, solar panels, wind turbines, and natural gas production. Some things to note, in order to get the 345 megawatts of energy, you would need 23 square miles of solar panels. That's about the size of Iowa City. So that's pretty infeasible. There's the breakdown with storage with the batteries versus without for both wind turbines and solar panels. As you can see, solar panels without the batteries cost $2.1 billion. With the storage, rises it all the way up to $4.1 billion. So it adds another $2 billion to the project. Some other key areas of note, the Natrium reactor would take 31 years to pay off the principal. That is the highest amount on the board that we looked at. Much larger compared to even the other nuclear reactors, but especially wind, solar, and natural gas. The lifespan there, you can see the breakdown. The ones with the stars are the nuclear reactors, which, as I said earlier, have a 40-year base limit and can apply for 20 years extensions. Most plants now are either are somewhere in the middle of their first 20-year extension and looking to get their second, but we don't have many cases of that happening, so it's hard to say how long they're able to last. One final note here is that if you were to get 80 years of production out of one of these other sources of energy, you would take wind turbines, for example. 25 years is the expected lifespan for a wind farm. In order to get 80 years, you would need to build this wind farm 3 times over, basically. So your initial capital cost being $1.8 billion, triple that to just under $6 billion. As I said, these values change with tax credits, subsidies. The DOE paid for half of Natrium's, or the Wyoming Natrium plant, taking the $4 billion down to $2 billion, which places it just slightly higher than wind turbines with storage, and shrinking that 31 years to pay down to 15 and a half or so. These are our references. We have notes throughout, so hopefully if you're interested in learning more about this stuff, obviously we're going to answer some of your questions, but you can look through these in your own time. So, is there any questions you all have for us?
Yeah, thanks very much. This is Harrelson. So I guess in this, maybe we can go back to the table that we were just looking at. With all these comparisons, there's a lot to kind of take in here,
Yeah.
but I like that you pointed out that, to get 80 years out of something else, you're going to have to double those costs or triple those costs. So that's a good thing to point out. I'm noticing with like the solar panels, for instance, with storage versus without, so that points out the cost difference there, but can you remind me what the requirements that you were making these systems meet? And so like do both of those systems meet the same capabilities, or like because there's not storage,
Yes.
what are you giving up for that cost savings?
So without storage, based on my assumptions, you get, in order to get 345 megawatts of energy, you're only operating for 1/6 of the time. So you need to scale everything up by 6 to get that amount of energy. So if you could use an entire day's worth of energy in 4 hours, that's how much it would cost. We can't do that, obviously. So this is how much more expensive it is to include the battery systems.
Got it. But it doesn't change the total number of panels that you're having,
No.
which is what's driving the
Correct.
land area. Interesting. Okay. And then with the natural gas comparison, I like having that there to like compare to sort of the
Yes.
standard for today. Does any of this factor into lead times and how long it takes to get a gas turbine, because that's becoming very difficult these days?
Well, the Natrium reactor was purported to be able to be finished in 2 years. They broke ground, I think October last year, and they're saying now it's going to be about 2030 when it's actually all is said and done, and they're able to actually put in their first load. I haven't looked to see how long it would take to get a natural gas facility up and running. Grace? No. I couldn't give you a solid answer without
okay,
looking
yeah.
into it further.
And Adam, that's just construction time, correct? That doesn't include permitting time?
Yes.
Okay,
For the Natrium.
correct.
That's from.
So
yeah.
once it opens in 2030, then there'll be more time to.
No, there would
Oh,
have
they've
been
been
permitting
working
in
on
the
it for a long time
run up.
already.
I think, and Wim, you may know more, the last I heard is you want to plan on like 8 to 10 years total to account for the time it takes to get the permits and move through the planning process. Does that sound
It
about
sounds
right?
about right, though I'm not in generation, I'm in distribution. But yes.
So no one in this room is an expert on that.
Quite a long time.
Any other questions?
Yeah, this is Bork. The Natrium reactor and the solar panels with storage have the similar cost of $4 billion. So why is it that the years to pay off is significantly higher for the Natrium?
Because if you look, the next category over is operating costs. So for solar panels, it costs $4.8 per megawatt hour to operate the solar farm versus $36.3 per megawatt hour. And so basically the cost there is significantly higher to run the Natrim facility, which is why it takes so much longer to pay it off in the end.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
This is Silman. One thing I was wondering about when you were talking about, the facility and the different, sort of checks and balances in it, like, do those safety features, are they considering, like, different weather events like tornadoes and, just other kinds of horrible things that could happen?
Yeah. So from what I was looking at, the majority of the safety systems that are being considered specifically for this plant that I have found were a lot of ones from the Wyoming site. So there are definitely opportunities for those more to be considered. However, a lot from what I was gathering with the Wyoming site because of the differences in weather. However, the safety systems itself will match with almost every system on site, and there's just differences for that. But one thing to note that I did not put on that sheet is that the reactor itself is underground. Right? Yeah. So that is underground. So the reaction itself with the radioactive material and the sodium cooled is all underground. So as well as the salt piping, which holds more radioactive materials and salts, they're all underground. So in this scenario, if we're talking severe weather with tornadoes or storms, the only things that would be majorly damaged possibly would be the facilities themselves, and less likely with the reactor or facilities that hold those radioactive materials.
I have a quick question. In doing this report, did you guys explore or come across anything of like the politics of this situation? I mean, with Wyoming being one of the largest producers of, or, I don't know if producer is the right word, but, natural gas and oil. Did you guys look into or discover along the way why they're leaning towards nuclear right now? In this project, rather, at least.
From what we found, there wasn't a ton of research into the politics surrounding that. What we do know is that TerraPower has partnered with another company. I'm forgetting the name at the moment. But this company as well, I think, could possibly have more ties there, but I know there have been talks after researching the past couple weeks with the new development. There have been talks with that information.
I was just curious. Thank you.
I'm curious. Thank you for your information on this too. I can tell that you've really learned your stuff. You're able to talk without notes, and it's impressive. It's great. I'm curious if you came across anything with workforce and, based on number of jobs created for this, and what that would look like, comparatively, potentially. I would just be curious to see that. That could be a selling point for some.
Yeah, so in terms of construction, I believe the number was somewhere around 10,000. That seems high, so don't quote me on that. In terms of continuous operation, this size of plant would have a team of 5 or so engineers, and then technicians would be about 40 to 50 full-time round-the-clock shifts positions. So, plus, you know, various managerial and office work type
Sure.
type jobs.
It's looking like there are no other questions, is that right? Well, I want to give a big thank you to Adam and Grace, and I also want to point out that they did this project last semester, which means they completed it, managed to remember all this information over the summer, and are now presenting on it, which I think is super impressive. So thank you so much for carving out the time to come and share the results of your research. We're very appreciative.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. It's been an amazing opportunity.
All right, well, we'll let them go, and we will move on to the rest of the agenda.
Alrighty, well, that brings us to our old business, the prioritization scoring of the items related to transportation.
Yeah. As I had mentioned previously, some of you had requested an opportunity just to run through the report we had generated on transportation items and ask any questions. In the interest of time, I'll go through them pretty quickly, and just please jump in and stop me if you have a question. So the first one on them is TE1, Significant Transportation and Outreach Campaigns. I'm sure when you read through the report, you saw that we had a number of them. I'll just highlight the most recent, which has really been to concentrate on promoting the fare-free transit service. And I think we've had some good returns on that, but we also have been expanding our efforts to be sure that we're including some active transportation outreach as well, and this has included hosting a Bike to Work Week breakfast last year and this year, and also collaborating with our MPO staff on that Bike Ped event that we actually just held last month, and then of course our ongoing EV car show and walk and roll weekly promotional item for Climate Fest, which I'm happy to report we actually had 47 people take us up on that. And now that the event has happened, we can reveal that the giveaway was, we had beeswax wraps that were printed up with Goldie on them for all our past campaigns, and people seemed really excited to get them. Yeah, so are there any questions about the ongoing outreach we're doing there? All right. Moving on, TE2 is to launch an eco-driving campaign alongside employers. We have talked about this a little briefly, that this was in some ways, you can tell, an artifact of a pre-pandemic planning process for the Climate Action Plan, that there was an idea to reach out to employers and really promote carpooling, which we did try to do in the first few years after the pandemic, particularly gauging ACT, which was our most promising an interested local company in working on something like that. They, of course, have moved out of their campus because so many of their employees are working remotely. And that tends to be what we've heard from other employers, that we do try to bring it up when we do visits with larger employers, that we're very interested in working with them on these kinds of initiatives. Where we have seen the most traction recently is thinking about employers we could be reaching out to promote our fare-free service for their employees. And in particular, our communication staff, I know, has done some outreach to the firm that is moving into the old Pearson location, because we do have a bus route that runs up there. That's sort of in a preliminary stage, but it's a tricky one. I would say originally looked at carpooling, now looks more at fare-free. We could circle back on carpooling, but I think this one's been subject to some shifts just in overall commuting patterns. Any questions there?
This is Harrelson. I just had one comment that
Yeah.
I kind of thought maybe the hospitals might make a good next goal for that. As far as, I mean, we've got the new hospital in North Liberty, but even the one here downtown, people come from sort of maybe outside of our bus transit range. So I don't know if that's something we've looked into in the past, or
Yeah, that's an excellent thought, and apologies that I hadn't noted that. We are in regular communication with the university about their commuters, and in particular, one of the reasons we launched Fare Free when we did in August, which was a little ahead of the schedule we had originally planned for, was because that is when the university issues its parking permits, and so the idea was if we could launch it then employees would have a chance to get on the bus and not pay for a parking permit that they're not going to use or realistically probably would use for that year. So there's been some success there. We are aware of their own carpooling efforts with the van pools that they work with, although I don't know that we've gotten updates on that recently. But I do know their van pooling project was part of what inspired the eco-driving campaign that has been done through ECOG, which is the Council of Governments. And you might recall, I think it was 2 years ago, we had a virtual webinar highlighting the ability for any employer in the area to set up a van pool using those resources. We're probably, to be honest, probably ripe to circle back and promote that again.
Cool.
It's a good point, thank you. Incentivizing public transit options, no surprises here. We took a couple baby steps in the run-up to launching Fare Free service. Now doing Fare Free is the primary way we are subsidizing it. You can't subsidize it much more than free. But we've seen great success with that, and I think it's really notable. We will be notable that in the first year of the program, we saw a reduction of 1.8 million vehicle miles traveled within city limits. And we've got our eyes out for that number for the second year, which should be coming out here in the next few months. So we'll continue to promote on that. We did, as you may recall, have an event built into Climate Fest, in part in response to comments we had gotten from the commission about trying to highlight the fact that parking rates were increased to try to help with Fare Free. And we had a really positive response to it. It was a really nice event. So, we did hear comments from people who were not aware that the increased parking fees were helping in some ways support Fare Free service. In fact, I will say one of the more touching things that happened in Climate Fest is we had a resident spontaneously donate art for the event. That was a sign that looked like it said the word parking with a child swinging underneath it, and the ing had kind of been erased to make it look more like park. And when I reached out to the gentleman and said, thank you so much, this is so generous, and we've never had anything like this, and I said, I regret I was in a meeting when you dropped it off and wasn't able to thank you in person. He said, that is all right. I will take my thanks in the form of free transit service. So really nice.
That's cool. Sarah, I'm just curious, have you seen any decrease in parking tickets potentially? Because people know, I'll be more apt to pay if it's for Fare Free. Random thought, I don't know.
That would be amazing.
That would be cool.
I don't know. We can try to find out what the parking data is. I will say we have seen a decrease in parking downtown, most likely because people are getting on the bus more. So those two things are working in hand. In fact, they might be working hand in hand a little too well. We're starting to have some discussions about how do we make up for the lost parking revenue to help maintain the parking ramps, so I think that is probably going to be folded into the parking study that has just been launched by our transportation plan, or our rather land use planners, to reevaluate our parking requirements and parking minimums in the city, and also how are we handling parking. So that'll be ramping up now as the comp plan public effort is winding down. Cool. TI2 is explore electric vehicle incentives based on the readiness plan. Most of our incentives so far have been in the form of just building out the public charging infrastructure. We did do some promotion of the EV incentives that were available during the IRA. So this was an item that was adopted, and then the Inflation Reduction Act came out, and we were like, great, it makes the most sense to promote those incentives and use our dollars for other things. Of course, those incentives have now gone away. But we actually last week I participated in a panel discussion for the Gazette's Ideas Conference. And I was on the panel with someone representing the Iowa Automobile Dealership Association. And he was talking about things the industry is doing and dealerships are doing to try to think about pivoting now that those incentives are going away. And so following that conversation, we set up a conversation with our office and the dealership representative to say, can you tell us more about what's happening on the dealer level and how we might be able to support that in Iowa City, or so an interesting conversation. I think it's in the developmental stage right now, but I can keep you posted on those conversations certainly. All right, that brings us to TR1, review parking regulations and consider innovative ways to encourage alternative modes of travel. As I mentioned, we are undertaking a parking study now. And so we are looking to report out on that and on the findings. And that's something really being undertaken by our planners. You could argue that the other innovation, of course, is the one going hands in hand with the transit initiative. And you'll see there is a little note here about the demonstration bus bike rack we put on our parking garage, which I think got listed on this just because it was something at the parking garage and there wasn't a good place to put it in the report otherwise. But we felt like touting that as an accomplishment because it was very successful. We do see people using it. And in fact, we have heard from other cities that have copied the idea since then. So that's exciting. Requiring climate change analysis for new subdivisions and rezonings. As you can recall, this is the one where we weren't quite sure what it meant. And then we had the benefit of John Fraser talking about it being transportation focused specifically, thinking about what are the traffic impacts when you put in a new subdivision. That is something that is a normal part of subdivision review and approval for the city. So we decided that it made sense to pivot and look at how this analysis could be folded into the overall comp plan and land use planning process, and that is how we ended up with Angie representing the commission on the comp plan. So I think this one too, a little bit, we're waiting to see what comes out of the comp plan and then comp plan process, and then we can try to put into place some of the recommendations that flow out of that. Oh, come on in. Speak of the sunlight and you will see its rays.
We were talking about the comp plan and then you came. It's like summoned.
That brings us to TCP1, establish an electric and fuel-efficient vehicle purchasing policy. I did actually confirm as we were updating this report that we did adopt a purchasing policy for the city for light-duty vehicles in particular, that EVs or hybrids at least have to be considered first before different models can be purchased. And if a different model is purchased, then there has to be some justification why we went in that route. So that has apparently been working well for the city. We have, as an outgrowth of that, then undertaken the fleet transition study, which identified other ways that we might move beyond just having a preferred purchasing policy and actually be making concrete plans to electrify portions of our fleet. The most recent examples, of course, being the Ford Lightnings that were purchased for the police department and for our AmeriCorps team, which I have to tell you, our AmeriCorps team loves that truck. We have heard from past members, and now the incoming members are quite excited to get trained with it. So it's been a good ambassador to the AmeriCorps team, at least, and we're excited. This will be our first year where they will go to every house in the electric vehicle. So we're hoping that'll be a good ambassador as well, and have made the training part of their first week with the city so that if they get any questions from residents when they pull up, they'll be able to talk about EVs as well. And of course, the Chevy Blazer has arrived for the police department. It was featured in the homecoming parade last week. That was its first rollout, and it is now in active duty in the streets of Iowa City. It's on a rotating shift schedule, so it goes out for a shift, and then it comes in and charges for a shift, and then it goes out for a next shift, and we have a 3-shift rotation for our police vehicles. So it's on the road 2 out of 3 shifts a day, which is really great. And we are having a media event for it this Wednesday to sort of raise the profile, with the thought that it's an example of just the range of EVs that are available and their capabilities. You know. Any questions on this? I know I'm moving through these very quickly. Cool. All right. Tracking adherence to the city idling policy. I did touch in with our fleet manager about this. We hadn't touched in a while. He told me that they have been putting basically monitoring devices on all the city fleet. It was a 3-year process to get it all on the vehicles to make sure that we're complying with the policy that says, you know, when a vehicle is stationary, it needs to be turned off. And he reported that the ongoing monitoring shows pretty good adherence to that policy among the city staff who are driving the vehicles. There were some data errors that were detected with some of the units, so he has been actually working with the software company to see if the issues could be resolved or if the units need to be replaced. But part of that has been just a valuable communications loop, you know, talking to the company that provides that hardware about how it could be improved as needed. So I actually am quite pleased with the results of that, to hear how well it's going. And of course, the plan is to continue that monitoring going forward. TCP 3 is to review transportation subsidies, work schedules, and telework policies for city staff. We have noted in a previous meeting that that has been completed, that following COVID-19, the city took a closer look at telework policies and has allowed a bit more flexibility for city staff members to work from home as needed. As you can imagine, there are a number of things that do require city staff to be present. You know, you can't visit a communication or a customer service rep at their home. So it has been enacted on a department and division basis based on the work assignment for each employee. One of the things that has come up recently in discussions between city staff and city management is now that we have fare-free transit, we used to provide a subsidized transit pass for city staff to try to incentivize city staff taking public transit. Now it's free for us as well. And so one idea has come up is, could we pivot and provide some sort of subsidy for folks who drive EVs to the city, or employees who drive EVs to work? You know, could they either get discounted charging or a discounted parking rate as a way of subsidizing that? As I understand it, there are some questions about fairness, given the limited number of EV drivers, but that has made us pivot and look at maybe some other creative ways that we might subsidize it that would be low cost to the city and potentially fun. I actually had just had a conversation with the city manager about an idea to allow employees potentially to credit their commute time during bike to work week if they come by bike. And the idea, if it works, is that we could explore something similar for National Drive Electric Month, where employees who drive an EV can credit a portion or of their commute time for coming in an EV, and that might be a way of subsidizing it that doesn't raise questions of like, well, then how do we pay the EV charging tax to the state and what have you. So, and actually, we've been in conversation with my counterpart in Cedar Rapids about this idea as well. So it may be something that we could implement regionally or, you know, try out in different city settings. So, not something that I think was originally envisioned with this item, but I think a good demonstration of some creative thinking we're trying to do to meet these requirements. Whew, all right, public projects. TPP1, complete the transit study and implement recommendations to bolster service and increase ridership. This has taken a couple forms. One was to redo the routes, which was done several years ago. As a result, some routes get more frequent service, including Court Street, which I'm very happy about because that is my route. It runs on a 20-minute schedule now instead of a 30-minute schedule. And there are a couple other routes that got that upgrade. We actually just implemented some more of those route change recommendations this August. One of them was to do away with the downtown shuttle because that had previously been the only free route. Now all the routes are free, and several other routes duplicate that. When that change went in, we had city staff out at different bus stops trying to help people get on the bus or figure out what is the bus they can use now, particularly for students who may not have been aware of the change, when they left in the fall and now suddenly have to rethink their commute. And what we heard from those staff members is the students are all tech savvy. They have the app. They'd figured it out right away. And although there was some nervousness on the part of some students who were talked with about, like, what do I do now that I don't have this one route I was counting on? What they quickly realized is actually, if you account for all the other routes, there's more frequent service to be a little more comprehensive in the bus you're taking. And so it actually has been a really positive change for those folks living downtown, which is great. We also implemented, and I think this is so interesting, on Oak Crest, which is one of our busiest routes. It goes up past the hospital and then on to an area where we have a lot of multifamily housing that is lived in by students and graduate students. That bus is packed during the high commute times, and so we have actually implemented a chaser bus during peak commute hours, which means there are two buses and they kind of leapfrog over each other on the route so that as one fills up, another has capacity to take on those additional riders, which I think is cool. The next step in this is, as part of the transit plan, is to look at bus stops and bus shelters. And City Council has just had discussions about accelerating the release of an RFP to get more bus shelters so that we can be putting them in at some of the recommended sites around town. So hopefully we'll have some updates there as well. All right.
Sarah,
Yeah.
you kind of answered this with a bit of that, but with going to fare free, have we seen kind of uniform increase in ridership across the routes, or are there going to have to be some route changes because of the changes that we've made? Does that make sense? And do we need a new study because of that?
Good questions. We have not seen uniform increases. We have seen general increases across the board, but they have been pretty variable. Some, like Oak Crest and Town Crest, have quite high ridership. Some have lower. This actually led to one of the promotions that we've had the last 2 years running, which is called Route Madness, where we track the increase on different routes, and the winning route gets donuts for all the riders at the end of March. So it kind of taps into March Madness a bit. That's become really fun. People are looking forward to it. I'm not sure that it has actually motivated people on other routes to be like, we got to get in there for the donuts, but it is a nice way of thanking folks who have found their buses to be much more crowded and are still sticking with it, which is nice. I don't know that there are plans to do another transit study in the near future. I think transit's priorities at the moment are to continue implementing some of the recommendations from the current plan, and also we're hoping to break ground on our new transit facility in 2027. That goes into design this year. And so I think that's sort of taking up a lot of the bandwidth, but I imagine when that's completed, we'll be at about the 10-year mark from the study, and then that will be when another transit study is likely considered, but I can't confirm that with transit if that would be helpful. Okay. I imagine based on the success of the Chaser bus, there may be some determination about whether to do that with other routes as well. I don't know, it just seems so action-packed, doesn't it? Like, Chaser bus. All right, That brings us to TPP2, Complete Electric Vehicle Readiness Plan and Implement Recommendations. We, of course, have been talking about this a lot in recent meetings, and you had seen a copy of that EV plan. I will just say that the most recent thing we've done for that is in the plan, it called for the launch of an EV information page on the city website. And we actually did that thanks to some heroic efforts on Diane's part to get it up and running in time for Climate Fest so that we could advertise it at our EV event. And then I think now with the incentives going away, as we had discussed before, we're looking at revisiting some of those items that are in the plan to see what else we could be implementing. We'll be having that conversation with the dealer. And also, we were for many years running the only EV readiness plan regionally in the state. Northeast Iowa has recently completed a study, and they had a very interesting workplace charging component to it. So we have reached out to the folks who were involved with that to see if they would like to come and talk to the EV readiness plan we convene for the 5 cities that collaborated on ours, to see if there's some ideas we could borrow. And part of the reason we did that, of course, is from the discussion here in the commission and the interest in promoting workplace charging. So we're interested in hearing more about what they did, what seems to be working, what doesn't, and hopefully that will get folded into our efforts for the next year or the year after. And then the final one, that achieve gold bicycle-friendly community status and begin work toward platinum status. This one breaks our heart every year. We do continue to apply year after year for gold bicycle-friendly status. As I've shared with the commission in the past, we seem to be stuck at silver. We have had our MPO staff be very proactive and reach out to the League of American Bicyclists to talk about what are the other things we could do, particularly noting that there are other cities that have lower scores than we do that get gold designations. And the last time Sarah had this conversation with them, the response she got was, well, the score's not everything. So a little bit, it seems up to the, I don't want to say whims exactly, but there's some mystery to the process that we can't fully target. And so I would just say on this one in particular, if this is one that the commission feels strongly about, and I can certainly understand that, it might be helpful. I mean, we will, of course, continue to keep applying for it, but we might take a look at what are the recommendations for that and see, could we be pursuing those? Does it make sense, for example, to have a bollarded bike lane? Should we be concentrating on key parts of infrastructure like that, or some other program? Because it's a good and worthy thing to pursue for the community, whether or not it gets us bicycle gold status. Does that make sense? Yeah. That's sort of how we approach other things, like our Soul Smart designation and the Charging Smart designation that we're hoping to start working on. Is to use the guidelines in the end to guide community activity more so than the pat on the back. The pat on the back's always nice. So, are there any questions on those now that we've run through them? Okay.
Is there anywhere that purchasing more electric buses fits in? Is that the fleet plan?
Yeah, it's a little in the fleet plan, in the fleet electrification plan, certainly identifies going after more buses. I'm quite happy to report, actually, this item I think is going to come before City Council to move forward on getting 4 new Gillig buses. The last 4 buses were Proterra buses. And there are a couple things that are significant about that I think are actually very worthwhile for you all to know as representatives to the community, because certainly we have been getting questions about why would you invest in electric buses again, given that the Proterra buses are no longer functioning or aren't functioning at present. The first thing that's notable about Gillig buses is that every other bus in the city fleet is made by Gillig. And what's significant about that is that that means the parts are also interchangeable and familiar to our maintenance staff. One of the difficulties, actually the most significant difficulty we ran into with the Proterra buses is that they had unique parts that really needed to be serviced and provided by Proterra itself. And when Proterra went bankrupt, we essentially lost our ability to maintain those buses, right? Gillig has been building buses for over 100 years for city fleets, and so it's very familiar with the needs of transit fleets and familiar to the folks who work on them. One of the ways it was described to me by our maintenance staff is that Proterra was a battery company that decided to try to build buses. Gillig is a bus company that is building electrified buses, right? And so we have high hopes for this technology. If the Gilligs don't work out, then we may need to do some serious soul searching about the future of these buses. But everything we're hearing right now suggests that this is a good direction for us to move in. We hope to take possession of those buses. If we put out for them now, we'll probably see them operating in the city in 2027. So, and then when the new facility is built, it is being built with the idea in mind of a more fully electrified transit fleet. So we are going to continue to move in that direction. The other thing I tell people, in case you hear from others about the Proterras and why are we continuing to invest in them, I will just fully own this. Like when I was in college, I drove a Chrysler E-Class. That car was terrible. And it talked. It was like an early version of a talking car. And the worst part of it is that whenever it had a malfunction, it would tell you it was malfunctioning, but the voice board would melt. And so it would come out in this kind of gravelly, like, oh, prompt service is recommended. My takeaway from that was not to never buy a car again. It was to never buy a Chrysler E-Class again. And that's the approach we're taking with the Proterras. Now you know something about my terrible driving history. Any other questions?
This is Marie. Just a quick question about the Proterras. My memory is that they were selling them based on the fact that they were in other cities. So have all these other cities had issues also with them?
Yes, yes. And as much heartburn as we have about having 4 non-functioning buses, there is a city in Florida that has 80 non-functioning Proterra buses. It hurts, But also, this is one of the functions of government, to experiment with technology, to help developing technology get a foothold in a marketplace that it might not be able to otherwise compete in. And I'm not saying we need to do that over and over and over, but it's important for us to experiment and try with these new technologies, both for our own learning and, to support their emergence in the market. So what I would ask now is, you should all have a sheet in front of you. If there are any numbers you would like to revise based on this conversation, just scratch out the one that's there and put the new number in. We will take them back up and compile them. I'm so sorry, Michelle, that for some reason we didn't get yours, but
That's okay. I just transposed it on here, so thank you.
fantastic. And then you can just leave them at your seats and we'll collect them up after you all leave.
All right, well, perfect. Is there anything you would like to talk about, Sarah, with the buildings section next?
Yes. So as you may recall, the big reason we undertook this, well, 2 reasons we undertook this reprioritization is that we're reaching the end of the accelerated action plan timeframe. It was supposed to end at 2025. And the other was so that we could identify potential metrics. And that was the promise we made to you, that after we did the prioritization, we would go back through and look at the top scoring items and see if we could pick one in each section of the plan to have, they're called metrics in other contexts. We were going to try the objectives and targets method of the environmental planning system that Jane Wilch presented on way back at the beginning of the year. In your agenda packet, I included a sheet that looked at potential objective and target metric for a tier one item. And I just, when I was looking at this, I picked the top scoring item on the thought that that is generally how it's done. You know, you pick the one with the highest score, and that's the one you affix your objective and target to. But that does not mean we could not use a different one in among the top tier one objectives. I will say it worked out kind of nicely that the top scoring one was also one that I could easily think of 3 targets that we might pick from. And the others, as I thought about potential targets for them, all got a little trickier to come up with, but that doesn't mean we couldn't explore it. The 3 that I thought I would bring for your consideration is if we look at the top scoring item, which is to partner with stakeholders to promote green building construction and rehabilitation. I added a little box here identifying who are the stakeholders because I think that's helpful for us to think through. And that would include home builders, remodelers, realtors, and appraisers, which is something that has come up in our green designations training that we have not really been able to connect with them yet, and they would be very helpful. So we have some thoughts there. But for the coming year, if we think about calendar year 2026, there are 3 things I could see us doing that would help grow our efforts. One would be just to set a target of a certain percentage of new homes receiving HERS ratings, right? I went upstairs and checked, like, is there an easy way for us to check this against the building permits that are being issued? And I think there is. If this is the one you choose, one of the things I would do is just check in and see where we're sitting right now. I have a gut sense that it might be around 15 to 20%. And what we could do is try to set a target that's just a little higher than that so that we've got that to stretch and grow toward. And that would be just a way of continuing those efforts. That being said, that program does seem to have some pretty robust participation. So if we wanted to say that one seems to be chugging along nicely, it might make sense to invest some energy elsewhere. A different item would be to engage realtors or appraisers with a green designations training. We did this, as you may recall, a few years ago, and that's what helped launch the HERS program. I recently was talking to the Iowa City Area Association of Realtors, and they were noting that it's been several years since we've run it, and they continue to have interest in it. So we could try offering that designations course again and see if we could get 40 more realtors or whatever number we would care to set to participate. And that might actually be a nice complement to what we're doing with the HERS ratings. Like, we've been concentrating on engaging the home builders. Now, if we can get this little reminder out to realtors so that they can be out promoting scores that have HERS scores and understanding how to do so, I could see some value in that. The other one I suggested was initiating a program for remodelers that is similar to the HERS program for new construction. There is a parallel program called the Pearl rating. We have not done much with it in the past. As it turns out, the person who provided the training in the green designations course passed through town recently and let me know that she is now working for the organization that does Pearl. And they are looking for cities to partner with to try to help promote a new launch of the program. And we have heard from remodelers in town that HERS is great, but they really could use something to help promote, like when they put in a higher HVAC system or solar panels, something that helps future home buyers understand the value of that in the same way. So there might be real value in something like that, and we might have a kind of unique opportunity coming up this year to pursue it. My question to you is, they all sound great. Realistically, thinking about staff capacity, we could probably concentrate on one of them this year. We might bank the other 2 for a future year. Which one would you like to see us invest our energy in?
I really like the idea of the Pearl program. And, you know, if you think about a lot of the older houses in Iowa City and so many people, you know, buying them and fixing them up, that seems like it would be, you know, while they're doing that, if we're promoting that with some of the remodelers, that could be a continuing opportunity to train people about, things that they could do to make long-lasting improvements. So I kind of like that idea.
Sarah, do you know what the price typically of anyone with like HERS rating, like what's the price point of those homes?
There's been a range. That is something we track. We've had, actually, this has been, I think, one of the most useful things about the HERS program is we've gotten great data on these homes as a result. And we have seen homes successfully get a HERS score at the $350,000 price range, which is about the lowest end of new construction currently on the market. We also had one that got it that went for about $1 million, So to me, what's significant in that is sometimes, not so much in Iowa City, but certainly at the state level, you'll hear an argument that energy efficiency drives prices up, that if you have more efficient home design, like your consumers are going to have to pay more for those homes. And the HERS data we've been able to gather very clearly shows it can be done at any price point, right?
Kind of thinking just more of like equity, are we, if you promote more with HERS, would it be like a higher price point? And, if it's focusing more on Pearl, maybe that's a little bit of a lower price point, more accessible. It's hard to say though, because some homes are just expensive. So it's probably a range in either way.
Yeah. Is this something you would like to take some time to sit with and think over, or do you feel prepared to give us some direction on it? I know it's the first time we're discussing it. We can certainly carry it over to the next meeting. And I could bring some proposed metrics or targets for the highest scoring transportation items so you could see how they sit side by side, if that'd be helpful, since we're looking at for one in each category.
Seeing head nods, yeah. I think so.
Well, we'll make that the plan. And certainly, you can continue to review these others if you see there's one on here where you're like, we'd really like to partner on a net zero affordable housing project. And you can see I've made some little notes, as to what might be the pros and cons for each, or what might be easy or challenging to set a target there. That one in particular, I'll say, like, that opportunity is probably going to come up or it isn't, and we just have to wait for when the opportunity is right. But I do have my eye on a project for 2026, I will say that. All right.
All right. Well, perfect. Well, that's the last item. So no members of the public, so we don't need to do public comment. Let's see. I think we will just confirm our next meeting time and location. So it'll be Monday, November 10th, from 4 to 5:30 p.m. here.
I do have a note on this one. I have been exploring trying to get a conference room for us to use for future meetings, partly for many reasons. One, I think it will be easier to hear each other in a smaller space. Two, we really don't need all this space for the public, so there are places we could be where that will still accommodate members of the public if they want to come, and we would have the option of moving into a bigger space if we get a lot of them, but it might allow us all to be at a table, which I think might also help you all, like, talk to each other, which I think is a good goal. And also, you all have been on the commission for a while. This room gets really cold in the winter, so I think there's a possibility of moving us into a warmer space. When we conclude this meeting, I will show you the space I have in mind, and then we can confirm it on the agenda for the next meeting. We just, because it'll be outside the regular meeting, we just can't vote on it or make a decision because we want to be very aware of open meetings law now that many of you have been through that training.
Sounds good. So we'll look at it, and then in November we'll come back here, and then we'll talk about December's meeting. Okay,
Does
perfect.
that sound good? Okay.
Sounds great. All right. Any action items for staff or the commission?
We will compile those transportation scores between now and then, and I will bring you a matrix just like we did for buildings, and I will also try to bring a proposed objective and target. So even though we're not going, we have 2 meetings left in the year, November and December, and as you recall, in December, we'll need to have elections for the chair and vice chair. So I don't think we're going to get through every single section of the climate action plan through our reprioritization, but buildings and transportation are our 2 biggest ones. We're borrowing a target from waste from our resource management staff, since they already do this process separately for theirs. That will just leave sustainable lifestyle and adaptation, and we can talk about whether or not, well, we can do that process, I think, in early January. I don't think it'll be too tough. Does that sound like a workable plan? I'm so sorry. My goal was to finish it by the end of the year. We'll almost have made that goal. Cool.
So then we don't need to score anything before the next meeting?
No, I don't think so. I'll try to, we'll take a look at and see what our time is looking like for the November agenda. If we think there's time, I'll try to bring maybe the reports for sustainable lifestyle and adaptation, so we can at least have an initial conversation about it. If not in November, then certainly in December. But you all are scot-free. You don't have to do anything except maybe give a little thought to the objectives and targets, and we'll pick up the conversation there next time.
Sounds great. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Solomon motions to adjourn, yeah.
Second,
Second,
Harrelson.
Harrelson, okay. Great, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.